It's time now for French Connections, our weekly look at the intricacies of life here in France with our very own Florence Villeminot.
Hey, Jeannie.
Hi, Flo. The MeToo movement that emerged in the wake of the Harvey Weinstein scandal had a major impact here in France, although no major French heads have rolled, at least yet, like in the United States. However, having said that, the movement's momentum hit a bit of a bump in the road with the publication of an open letter.
That's right. This letter was published on the 9th of January, 2018. 100 French women signed this open letter in the broadsheet daily Le Monde. You can see the title here. Nous défendons une liberté d'importuner. We defend a freedom to pester, which is intrinsic to sexual freedom. Now, who signed this letter? Well, essentially 100 high-profile women in the fields of academia, publishing, and entertainment. Among them, of course, the French icon, the cinema icon, Catherine Deneuve. The women in this letter lashed out against the kind of feminism that they say has emerged in the post-Weinstein world. In their view, the MeToo movement is Puritan, it's moralizing, it's a witch hunt that's fueled by a hatred of men, it's patronizing, and they say it treats women like children.
What we mean by the freedom to pester is that I consider myself an adult. I can hear a sexual proposition and I can say no.
Now, that letter sparked a lot of backlash around the world, but also here in France.
And it's really interesting to see the different reactions in and outside of France. Now, abroad, people were really quick to say, look, this is cultural. Of course, this kind of letter would appear in France. It really plays into that stereotype that French people have a very libertine view on sexuality and seduction. What people outside of France tend to overlook, though, is that it had a huge backlash here in France, where you must remember the Me Too movement was really big here in France, and it had a French equivalent, balance ton porc, rat or squeal on your pig, on your pervert, if you will. So this open letter that represents the opinion of 100 women officially on this letter, and many other women in France, it doesn't necessarily represent the opinions of all French women, and many French women, as I said, were outraged. Take a listen.
I don't understand their open letter. What are those women defending? We're just leveling the playing field. That's it. Men are going to understand what they can do and what they can't do.
In that open letter in Le Monde, all the stereotypes are there. The common preconceptions that we have to deal with on a daily basis at the water fountain, at work, at family dinners. It's like your awkward uncle who says, we can't say anything anymore. The fact that we can't say anything, or that we can say less than before, is a good thing.
Now, that woman you just heard from there is Catherine Deneuve, a prominent feminist who has, in a way, led the response to Deneuve. She wrote this column where she says every time women's rights progress, well, there's a resistance that appears, one step forward, one step back, essentially.
Now, interestingly, Catherine Deneuve, the French film icon herself, took one step back, going on to clarify her position in a new letter that was published in another daily newspaper.
This was published in Libération. Deneuve essentially distanced herself from some of the other women who signed that letter. Some of them had very controversial responses. And the truth is, if she hadn't signed this letter, it probably wouldn't have gotten as much attention as it did. Now, in this letter here, she didn't apologize for the open letter that the 100 women signed, but she did apologize to the victims of sexual assault who might have been upset.
And still, many people were surprised that Catherine Deneuve even signed that letter in the first place.
That's because Deneuve signed another manifesto. This time, this was in 1971. She signed the Manifeste des 343 Salopes, the manifesto that was actually written by Simone de Beauvoir, signed by 343 sluts. That's what they call themselves. Women who admitted to having an abortion in France when it was very much illegal. The abortion was decriminalized with the Loi Veil in 1975. Now, the reason that Deneuve decided to sign this open letter, she says, is because she's afraid of what she calls a cleansing of the arts, essentially censorship in the name of morality. And in a way, she's referring to a much broader debate that's happening in France right now about how do you deal with artists with very shady pasts. This comes up when we talk about the Franco-Polish filmmaker Roman Polanski, for instance. accused of sexual assault on minors. There was a big kerfuffle over a retrospective dedicated to him. But there's also been a big debate about Céline, an author, a very celebrated author, who was also violently anti-Semitic.
All right, coming back to this open letter signed by Deneuve, some people say it's revealed a war of the feminists, if you like, with on the one hand the Anglo-Saxon feminist tradition, and on the other, feminists à la française.
Indeed, there is this idea that French feminists are a little less brazen than Anglo-American, Anglo-Saxon, I should say, feminists. They're caught, I guess you could say, in the French tradition of galanterie, and that is our word du jour, chivalry, if you will. There are, of course, all sorts of rules for the way that men in France are meant to treat women, treat them with respect. Now, historians and philosophers have deconstructed this, saying that it's actually a way of hiding inequality and controlling women. But there is this very persistent idea that, relations between men and women are not as politically correct. And in fact, politically correct is a bad word here in France.
There's also the idea that things are just different here in France. And this is an idea that actually came up quite a lot during the Dominique Strauss-Kahn scandal.
There is this idea that when it comes to the game of love, well, things are different here in France. And French people are proud of being less puritanical, more at ease, I guess you could say, with sex and seduction than in the Anglo-Saxon world. And foreigners are sometimes surprised by how much open flirting happens here in the streets and in bars. And there is some truth to that. But a lot of it is also the Pépé Le Pew stereotype. When you think about French people, sometimes you think about the skunk, Pépé Le Pew. Now, what's so tricky about this debate about feminism and how it's reacting to the MeToo movement is that it's not just a generational thing, it's an ideological thing, and it's changing. France is changing. There's a lot of ideas that are being floated around, and there is a real awareness that's waking up. People are becoming aware about sexual harassment, appropriate behavior in public, private, and politics even. It's a thorny and emotional debate, and it's far from over.
It certainly is. Thank you so much for that, Florence Villeminot, with that look at today's French Connections. Don't forget, if you have other questions for Flo about anything you might not understand about France or the French, send her a tweet at Flo Villeminot.